Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's show on the 3rd of November 2014. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting this evening's broadcast. Looking how things kind of progressed along over the weekend, we had an upper level low dropping into Bristol Bay, pulling a lot of cold air south from the Russian Far East right down into the Bering here, and then it all sweeping eastward there, mostly to the south of Kodiak Island. This is what brought the snow in, especially to the Homer area, southern Kenai Peninsula on Saturday, and that extended and rotated through the southeast coast as well. Not too much going on up over the interior. And then for yesterday, again, another surge of moisture moved up to the southeast coast there, and that upper level system pushed to the Alaska Peninsula right in through here. It was still pulling down cold air and gusty northwest winds from the Bering down across the eastern Aleutians, and some weakening bands of moisture moving up to the North Gulf Coast and then kind of dissipating as they rotated back to the west and to the north. And down off the edge of the chart here, you can see the cloud shield with the next storm, which today pulled northward and brought gale and storm force winds to the southeast coast. Today moving right to about that location late this morning, around noontime today. Front spreading gusty winds, rain. Cape Decision at easterlies, east-northeasterlies there just to the west of Elfin Cove, gusting to 50 miles an hour or more. And there are high wind warnings out for the southern panhandle tonight as this pulls northward and the big pressure rises behind it. Could see gusts or sustained winds running 30 to 40 miles an hour with gusts above 60 up until about midnight, and then it drops off, weakens and moves northward. An extension of that frontal boundary also back along the North Gulf Coast right through there. That brought gale force winds and quite a bit of rainfall and heavy showers. There were some isolated thunderstorms just south of Prince William Sound. That was earlier this morning, mostly just areas of rain or rain and snow mixed, spreading westward into western Prince William Sound, Whittier on in toward Turnagain Arm, and then kind of a break right through here, just some isolated scattered snow showers up over the Copper River Basin, mostly over the east and southeast part there, and then some areas of light snow and this cloudiness along and back to the west of the Alaska Range, and that's about it for the interior. Pretty gusty winds up there in the Arctic coast, and also wasn't quite as clear up there as I thought it would be yesterday, carrying overcast skies, fog and flurries, and the gusty winds 20 to 30 miles an hour, and as high as 40 miles an hour in wind gusts there at Dead Horse during the day. Lighter winds, more of a 15 mile per hour range here for the central and western Arctic coast, but this low pressure area there bringing some clouds and flurries. That pulled the clouds southward in across the Chukchi Sea today, spread right down to the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, and some areas of light snow in among that, but nothing too terribly heavy. Otherwise, the same pattern here. Gusty north winds, St. George, 35 miles an hour in gusts, about 30 miles an hour there over the eastern Aleutians. Mostly snow showers up through here, temperatures in the upper 30s, made for a mixture of precipitation back down along the Alaska Peninsula. Unalaska picked up 1/1600ths of an inch water equivalent today, so pretty showery in that area. This low here still south of Kodiak Island. We have one just southeast of the Seward Peninsula there, or actually Resurrection Bay or Kane's Head. And we'll see tonight this low moves northward to about this position after midnight, later on tonight, and weakens there. So the high wind warning this evening for the southern areas, those gusts over 60 miles an hour, and then another trough will come in. Winds will become more southwest and the rainfall more showery. The heaviest showers up to the north now, the front well into Canada, but kind of angling back in across Skagway down toward Yakutat, but should be pretty dry along the entire east or north Gulf Coast. Possibly some showers extending into Kodiak Island, but most of that likely stay in the Gulf there. And still have the northwest winds here beginning to diminish. This high pressure ridge shifting eastward right up toward the eastern Bering now, almost the axis just west of the Pribilof Islands, St. Matthew Island on up into Russia. So pretty clear skies here, mostly fair over the western interior. In fact, all of the east side as well, northeast, just variable cloudiness tonight. Could see some lingering areas of light snow over the eastern interior on down toward Northway. But the stronger front out here to the west, pushing inland, the main low staying back up over the northeast Sea of Okhotsk. And so this front is going to weaken quite a bit. Actually, a little bit of a development right in this area, and we'll see for Tuesday, tomorrow. Weak low develops there, and the main front pushes off to the east. So you have gale force winds ahead of this front, probably dropping back to the 25 to 30 knot range there tomorrow afternoon as that weakens. High pressure is also weakening as it comes along the coast here. Very little gradient at all left, but there are aloft. There is quite a gusty north wind or quite a jet stream from north to south, but not really reflected at the surface here. They'll definitely keep the temperatures on the cool side in over the interior, with the low pressure area now just about stationary here in the Gulf of Alaska. Another trough rotates northward across the panhandle tomorrow morning, and then a little bit of a break, and then another frontal system brings more rain toward the south coast, spreading it northward with that weakening low up into Canada. Lots of clear skies, probably be a few clouds around, but definitely dry. Cop River Basin, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, right down into Kodiak Island. A few flurries possibly lingering there along the Kilbuck Mountains up in towards Minchumina, possibly Tanana, but should be mostly clear back to the north and northwest. Lingering areas of light snow on the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, not too bad for the North Slope. And then for Wednesday, excuse me, another storm system moves northeastward. Big trough low pressure here, again in the western Gulf of Alaska, and the cold air coming southward. That'll generate another system that'll rotate up toward the Queen Charlottes mostly, but you can see pretty good gradient works its way up to the southern panhandle along with the rain. Probably good enough for gale force winds, Dixon entrance, eventually shifting northward into the southern inner channels there, Clarence Strait and the southern coast. Could go back to gale warnings. And then another front here pushes up to the Gulf of Alaska, or from the Gulf of Alaska northward. So that should be good for easterly winds, 25 to 35, maybe gusting 40 miles an hour. So possibly definitely small craft advisories again, especially for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Lighter winds back toward the Barren Islands, and chance of rain or snow again. Southern Kenai Peninsula up into western Prince William Sound, much like we saw today. And then the clouds cut off about Cook Inlet. You're looking at pretty fair and cool conditions. Bristol Bay up along the entire west coast, as well as inland and off the coast. That east-southeast wind flow around this big high pressure area up over the Arctic there should keep it VFR along the entire coastline, even Nunivak Island and the Bering Strait, with kind of gusty winds, but not too bad here. Maybe some 20 to 25 knot winds possible there for the eastern or the western Arctic coast, with lighter winds off to the east. Out in the Aleutians, there's that ever weakening frontal boundary now, not much left to it at all. Most of that sliding off to the southeast, and the other low pulling back again to the northwest. A little bit stronger disturbance here, or with a tighter gradient to the south. That could bring some gale force winds here as this drops southeastward and bring some more rain and gusty wind conditions into Adak and then Atka. Temperatures today were in the 40s here across the panhandle, 45 at Sitka and up at Skagway, as well as Juneau, Wrangell at 41 degrees, and a 46 at Annette, 40 degrees in Cordova, as well as Seward, 34 in Anchorage, 37 in Kenai, Homer at 41, and in the Susitna Valley, Temperatures are in the mid-30s from Wasilla on up to Talkeetna. 10 degrees at Gulkana. Came up from below zero this morning there. Lower 20s for the Tanana Valley, Delta, and Fairbanks, but just 7 degrees at Tenelli Park at the Visitor Center. Eagle 17, 7 at Fort Yukon. There's a 13 at Tanana. And farther to the north, single numbers across the upper Yukon Valley. Bettles 8 degrees, Anatuvik at 5, 9 Selawik, and 5 at Kotzebue. 1 degree at Point Lay, otherwise lower teens here along the central and eastern coast, and 28 at Shishmaref, about the same, a little cooler there at Nome with 25, and Savunga pushed up to 30 degrees, lower 20s here from Unalakleet to St. Michael on over to Amonic, mid to upper 20s farther down the coastline there toward Nunivak Island or Macoriac, otherwise teens from McGrath on down toward Bethel, with upper 30s here at Iliamna, and a 32 there at King Salmon, but mid to upper 30s for the peninsula. Same for the Pribilofs, into the 40s for the Aleutians. And the lows tonight, below zero, as cold as 20 below here up over the northeast interior, with fair range now north of the mountains, dropping a little below zero, but the Arctic coast, especially on the central and west side, staying above zero. And temperatures range from 5 below there at Selawik to 20 above at Shishmaref. 13 forecast low for Tin City and 10 degrees for Amonic, with 9 at Bethel. Otherwise 15 to 20 in that range there for the Bristol Bay Area. 30s for the Aleutians, and teens to lower 20s for south central Alaska. 35 or 30s all along the coastline here, and mostly in the lower 40s for the Panhandle. For the highs tomorrow, lower to mid 40s for the southeast coast, and a little above zero here, except for that more purplish area there. That's below zero for the North Slope and the Brooks Range, of course, the upper Yukon Valley. Into the 20s out here over the Seward Peninsula. Teens all the way down to the coastline there, Kuskokwim Bay. 20s for Bristol Bay. Upper 30s to the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, mid 40s out in the central and western Aleutians. And flying weather. Again, system moves through tonight, but another trough coming up. Probably see some IFR with that tomorrow morning, lifting northward into the northern Panhandle and then stretching westward to a certain extent across Yakutat to about Cordova. But marginal VFR, mostly southern Prince William Sound to the southern Kenai Peninsula coastline, and just threatening Kodiak Island. Should be a mostly VFR day there. And then just some marginal stuff hugging the coastline, really not making it very far inland, and also along the western Arctic coast. And then a band of IFR with that front pushing eastward with some improvement following in behind. Anatuvik VFR on both entrances tomorrow, as will be Adigan. And Lake Clark, Merrill, and Rainy, all VFR. Windy too, Mentasta, Isabel, good flying conditions. No turbulence at all for the Alaska range. Tanita VFR, and for Portage VFR also. Chilkoot and White looks VFR, but coming down probably to IFR conditions tomorrow during the morning hours, and then possibly going marginal by late afternoon into the evening, and then coming down again. Freezing levels tomorrow here right at the surface, as well as 2,000 feet along the North Gulf Coast. Dropping a little bit cooler air here, again with that north and northwest wind flow, pulling a little chillier air down, 4,000 feet here over the southern southeast coast, and then a big push of warm air ahead of that frontal system that's driving eastward across the Bering Sea here, and also associated with the ridging in advance of the front, so 8,000 feet pushing up to the west central Aleutians. And looking at icing, could be some occasional moderate rime icing here, mostly below 14,000 feet in areas there. Otherwise, look for light with isolated moderate long and ahead of the frontal system, and then some more stuff coming in behind, more scattered and of a shallower nature. And then could be some areas of icing here below 10,000 feet with the moisture coming into the southeast coast. And some of that extending mostly off the coast there, could get up towards Montague Island. Some of that could slip down into Kodiak Island, but really the threats aren't all that great, and the greatest chance will be here across the southeast coast. And again, northerly winds, high pressure up here over the Russian Far East, and 80 to 90 knot jet at 33,000 feet coming southward. with upper level low there, and this trough kind of sharpening up here, so the jet stream will be south right across the Queen Charlotte's tomorrow, fairly strong here, 160 knots, especially where the two converge. And again, another storm will develop here and roll up to the southeast coast Wednesday afternoon, and then some more stuff poised to move into the Aleutians. For the 9,000-foot winds, northeasterlies 15 to 25 coming around the northwest and west side of that low just east of Kodiak Island, southeast 20 to 30 knots up to the Gulf Coast there, but mostly strongest winds will be on the east side, light variable into the high pressure area coming into the south or into the west coast, and then southerlies, but not all that strong, maybe 45 knots around Adak, and 40 knots at 3,000 feet with lighter winds here with a high over the eastern Aleutians into the west coast. And wind's not all that strong, 15 to 20 knots here on the west side of this low. A little brisker here, especially as it wraps up along the North Gulf Coast, maybe 25 knot winds, otherwise 5 to 10. And after, got to do turbulence. And for occasional light, moderate chop possible along the North Gulf Coast with those winds, also along the Alaska Range, along and to the east of there, Kodiak Island. The heavier stuff, though, out with that front pushing into the central Aleutians and across the Bering Sea. And after hangar flying, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. We're fortunate this evening because our guest is Carrie Long. Carrie is the recently assigned FAA Regional Administrator. Carrie was raised in New York State, graduated from Colgate, and later from law school at Cornell. Before going off to law school, Carrie served with a surface warfare ship with the U.S. Navy. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
What followed were jobs from Wall Street to Washington, D.C. Throughout, there was a connection with aviation. In 2007, he became the chief counsel for the FAA and later moved to the NTSB. Beyond the resume, what has struck me about Carrie since I've known him a short time is his incredibly approachable nature and excitement about being here in Alaska. Carrie, it's a real pleasure to welcome you to the program.
Harry, thank you so much.
Would you share with our audience your enthusiasm with being here in your new job?
I'm not sure I can do it in a few minutes, but I sure will try. It's wonderful to be here. As I say to people, I'm from the outside, but my home is Alaska, and Anchorage in this case. But I love it here. I came here, I love Alaska, and I love all things about Alaska, but I came here for a mission, and that's aviation safety. And the reason for that is that this is a state where there is so much of a need for folks to be able to operate efficiently and safely in aircraft. It's not just the way folks down in the lower 48 take a ride out on a weekend to go fishing, although that happens up here as well, obviously, but because the people in the villages rely on them for food, for mail, for health, and just touring the state, and done some and will do more. But just touring the state and seeing how needy the folks are in terms of transportation convinced me that this is the place where I can have the greatest impact on aviation safety than I could in the FAA. It's a wonderful place. It's got amazing geography. Sometimes I ask the question what Secretary Seward was thinking when he caused the United States to buy Alaska, but it's so unique, so different that in aviation especially, I love being here. It's about people flying safely in the state.
Well, as the regional administrator, I can tell you from personal experience that you oversee or lead a group of really dedicated men and women in the FAA doing all sorts of different jobs, but they're all focused on aviation safety. So to hear you talk about it, I can see how you're going to enjoy being up here leading these folks and working together with us, all of us, to make it a safer place to fly. You know, before the taping tonight, you mentioned the statistics that you just published for 2014. Can you talk about those? It's a pretty amazing story.
Yes, sir. It's I guess maybe a gift to me in my first 3 months in this position, but as we all know, a lot of advances in aviation have come because people have tried to grapple with the issue of accidents in Alaska, aviation accidents in Alaska. The agency is very pleased to announce that as of the end of the fiscal year, which ended September 30th, there were, and again, any accidents are too many, but in terms of the overall numbers and the history, 81 accidents, and of those 8 contained a fatal or serious injury. That compares with the year before, the total accidents 94, fatal serious injuries 21, and before that, in 2012, 108 accidents with 16 fatal or serious injuries. These numbers, and I'm looking at something that goes all the way back to 1997, these numbers are the numbers with the least accidents since 1997, where in 1997 total accidents were 159. We're at 81. And we hope to be better every year. The goal is always to reduce it to 0, but that's not always possible. What this means is more people get home to dinner, more people get to the hospital, you know, more people get their cancer treatments, more people get their food, and I'm just delighted to be here, to be a small part of it. It's not just us, it's not just the regulator, it's the culture of the people that's constantly getting more and more safety oriented.
What great news, because I can remember last year what a horrible year it was, particularly in the FSI arena. So thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being on the program tonight. I would like to get you back and talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen in the couple of months that you've been the administrator. So get you back on the program.
Love it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. I want to remind you that the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation is going to have our fall safety seminar November 15th, 8:30 to 4:30, Lusac Library here in Anchorage. It's going to be a great program. We'll be talking more about it on hangar flying, but we want to see all of you there, and in the meantime, fly safe.
Well, the gales and storms and high wind warnings, which are out mostly for the southern areas or areas of the southern panhandle here, are out for this evening, and then winds will diminish later tonight. And tomorrow, still a couple of disturbances rolling in. So 20 to 25 knots from the south or southwest to southeast up on the north coast, mostly southerly, 10 to 20 knots, some higher gusts over the inside channels. And then for Wednesday, another storm rolls up from the south. So gale force easterlies and northeasterlies here for the southern areas, small craft advisories just about everywhere else, although keep it 20 knots from the northeast here for that far north zone. And for the North Gulf Coast here, east 25, strongest here on the eastern stretch to just west of Middleton Island, and then northeast 15 from there. More of a northwest direction, 20 to possibly reaching small craft advisories at times across the Barrens, and northeast 10 to 20 for Cook Inlet, and 15 to 20 knot winds for Kodiak Island from the northwest. Those will become northeast here, pretty uniform, 15 knot winds northeasterlies, give or take, and that'll extend right up into Cook Inlet, and then kind of increase here as you head north or head northeast and back to the east. Looks like 30 knot winds there coming or returning back to the North Gulf Coast, and coming up to 20 knots from the northeast of Prince William Sound. Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, pretty light winds northeast, turning north and then northwest as a weakening high pressure ridge comes in from the west, northwest 20, southwest of Kodiak Island. And then the remnants of that front swings in. Looks like small craft advisories here, kind of a low spinning up just down to the south of the peninsula. So 30 knot winds there, and east 20 for Bristol Bay. And for the Aleutians tomorrow, kind of a light wind day for the Fox Islands. Again, high pressure moving across the area, but Southerlies at 20 knots to 25 knots, maybe even 30 knots to start with here for AKwx and ATCA. Lighter behind the front, and then some more gusty winds returning to the western zones. And for Wednesday, west or west-northwest, 30 knots. Could pick up 35 knots there west of AKwx with that developing system that'll be sliding southeastward. Otherwise, northwest 25 for the central Aleutians, and 25 to 30 knot winds southeast turning northeast, and then kind of a trough axis extending up just west in Akulski. For the southwest coast, northeast 10 to 15 knots. The Pribilofs becoming southeast, and tomorrow afternoon picking up to 20 knots, 25 knots for St. Matthew Island. And then for Wednesday, St. Lawrence Island, light easterlies, 25 knots southeasterlies for the northern Bering Sea. Pribilofs about 20 knots, and about the same easterly 10 to 15, easterlies 10 to 15 for the southwest coast. Arctic coast, light and variable on the east side, otherwise northeasterlies 10 knots to the central coast. Small craft advisories likely around Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. And then for Wednesday, looks like winds picking up a little bit here on the west side, but not all that much. Freezing spray, light winds from the northeast on the central and east coast. For tonight, pretty fair here over the interior. Some areas have more clear skies than others. Some lingering flurries over the eastern areas there. Snow showers on the decrease, staying breezy, but winds beginning to diminish as high pressure moves in. Persistent low pressure area there, also aloft in the Gulf of Alaska. That storm moves northward and weakens. Rain changes to showers, and another front brings more rain in tomorrow afternoon in the south. The trough spreads northward with rain tomorrow morning. Otherwise, much of Alaska will be fair. And here comes that front pushing to the central Aleutians, then the eastern Aleutians, quite weak at this time, but still pretty good gradient right through here. And another front pushes up to the North Gulf Coast. Another storm approaches the southern southeast coast for more rain and wind. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.